Spring practice number 1 is in the books.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're coming to you on this Wednesday after the first spring practice. Lars, just a reminder for all the everydayers out there, if you see us out of practice, feel free to say hi. And hey, if you like the content, make sure you subscribe wherever you're getting this, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. All that really does help us out. And if you're audio only, leave us a 5-star review if you're right here on YouTube. Click that little bell so you don't miss when we post anything new, anything like that. It all does help us out a lot. Lars, we're coming for this first spring recap. We got to talk about the offensive line. We're going to get there because got a starting 5, talk about what the depth is going to look like. We'll get there in a little bit. Some of our individual standouts like Omari Evans, who just absolutely blew up at the end of practice. He looked absolutely fantastic, but we just got to talk about the biggest thing is, this is going to sound really silly right off the top, but I swear, stick around. We're going to dive into all this. This just feels different than last year.
And obviously no kind of the obvious answer is because it is, but the reason why it's because it's like, hey, it is different. No duh. But it's like
crazy insight, right?
But the reason why it really is just, we had talked about it leading up to spring practice, where the first spring practice, where we said, like, man, like, you have all this depth, like, look at all this. And you look across the field and it's like, wow, you have 4 quarterbacks, you have multiple offensive lines, you have somebody's pointing out to me, it's like, wow, you have like almost like 9 like X amount of offensive lines. Like, well, yeah, you had like, that's twice as many as you had last year. Like, the entire offensive line available, you had 9. Now you have 18 scholarship guys. And so you just look at the numbers and say, man, like, everything is there. And then on the other side of that, what the main takeaway for me in that regard was all the coaches, where we look at JP Losman, we look at Chris Petrilli, who's literally got 88. I love it. Like, I just watched, it was like just running around to different spots, but it's like, well, I told you, like, last spring that was Jordan Papow, or that had to be Jordan Papow, who also then had to go back and coach at ends. Now you have a guy who's just solely focused on kind of like, and what it seems to me, what's intriguing is they're focusing on all the details. Like, having more allows you to focus on more. I know that sounds crazy, but it's like, it's more detailed than it is bigger picture. Like, hey, we need to focus on these 3 things. It's like, hey, we can focus on these 10 things because you'll take that, you'll take that, you'll take that, you'll take that, you'll take that. You have 10 guys for 10 things versus 1 guy for maybe 3 or 4 things.
No, absolutely. I love where you're going with that. The biggest thing for me personally, when I talk about different, is physically just what it looked like. I remember we had this conversation just regarding Ephesians Prysock last spring, where it's, oh, that guy just looks and moves differently at that position than everybody else. And I was telling this to our buddy Nick Lemkow from Last Word on College Sports. We're watching the linebackers and defensive backs go through just like a blocking, just the hand working drill with Kevin Cummings and Taylor Mays over there and a few other coaches. And both X-Ray Alexander and Tacario Davis were kind of just like hunched over, right? They're in their stance and they stand up at the end of the drill. And I said, oh, like those guys just look very different than what we saw at any point last year. Tacario is not only taller than Ephesians Prysock, but he's just more built. He has more muscle. And with X-Ray Alexander, he's listed, like we talked to him before, right? But it's a little different when you see these guys and they're not wearing full pads yet, but you see them out there and you look and you say, okay, yeah, I understand, when you talk about a Big Ten linebacker, that's what you want him to look like. And he looks a little bit different than Buda Alukta, than Jacob Manu, who's on the sidelines, Adrius Randy-Saleh. Jonathan Epperson looked a lot bigger at that position, just another thing I noticed. And like it resonates with the offensive line. I kind of want to hold off on that talk just because we're going to devote a lot of time to that one. But it really resonates with every single position that you look at. And you think about what you saw from, that Jonah Coleman transformation of his, body fat and everything, and just what he looks like physically after 8 weeks in Tyler Owen's offseason program. And you look around the field and you say, okay, yeah, I see that at like every position.
Yeah, and we'll just kind of focus on running back, where you mentioned Jonah. Watching Scotty Graham go through some of those drills, you look and then you see Adam Muhammad. It's like, yep, he's taking the next step. You see, like, he looked big and already impressive last spring. He's just taking that next step. But then I look over and see Julian McMahon, and I look down at the depth chart, or not depth chart, but the roster, and it's like, oh no, he's every bit of 6'1",
230.
Yeah, like, and he to me it was like, who's that walk-on who's that like JUCO sophomore or something like that? Like somebody that they got who they also did get Bo Walker, worth noting, but not who I was talking about in that situation where you just look and say like, man, but again, it's about stacking talent every single year. So yeah, he might have been a 3-star and you got the 4 stars. Adam Muhammad was a 3.
Yeah.
So you look at it, you can clearly see Scotty Graham as a type, and then the way you work with the whole program is you have Tyler Owens. Every year, Adam Muhammad gets a little bit bigger. Julian McMahon, next year, maybe he trims down a little bit, but gets stronger. And so you maybe lose 5 pounds of overall weight, but you gain like 5 or 10 pounds of muscle in that regard. And it's all about just continuing that development. And so I know we always repeat the cliches that Jedd says, the foundation, the development, the organization, all the cliches, all the football verbiage, if you will. But it is proof of concept where you can see it year in and year out. And now this spring, like Adam's taking that next step, and then Julian's right behind him. Quade Carr is obviously there as well. But you just see the progression at running back in particular.
No, absolutely. And I feel like it's the same thing when you look at the defensive line, where there was a point in time where you, me, our buddy Nick Lemkow, and then my guy Alex Katzen from Huskies Wire, friend of the program, we're all just standing there, and we just kind of point across the field at Simone Peppa and Logan Sagapolo standing next to each other. And they both came out on the field at the same time for one of the 11 drills they were doing. And we just called it the beef package. Like, yeah, getting those two guys on the field at the same time, on the goal line, whatever it might be, is going to be really nice, where Logan Sagapolo has shed some weight, looks a little bit better physically. And then you look at Simone Peppa, where he's listed at 6'2", 350 now, looks every bit of that, by the way, but not in like a bad way where you're concerned when you go and you watch his tape and you say, yeah, it looks like he's playing somewhere in that 340 to 350 range and still moving very, very well. So I'm encouraged by that, but it's the defensive line as a whole. What we've seen from Ontario Thompson in terms of workouts, in terms of offseason stuff, where again, not seeing them in pads makes some of these, just assessments very just face value, where it's okay, we got to look at the way they move. You got to look at this. You got to look for that. And we saw that from Ontario Thompson. The way he moved, just you see why he blocked a couple of punts at his time at Iowa, and as he said, should have had a whole bunch more. You look at Taitai Uyunglele, and Jedd Fisch talked about him playing even more positions than Ryan Walters did yesterday. And you say, okay, yeah, I get that, because he's 6'4", 280, and doesn't necessarily look like he's carrying all that weight. He does not look like somebody who is that size. And we looked at what that defensive line was last year and how it wore down the stretch. And that's something where knowing, we saw Armand Parker doing a little bit today. A lot of the guys who Jedd Fisch said were injured were still moving around, doing some individual drills. We saw Russell Davis out in the stadium doing some things by himself. And it's just nice to know that all those guys are not, hurt to the point where they're still on the sidelines, right? And I say all that because all of the concerns that you saw arise about the defensive line down the stretch, against Indiana, against Oregon, against Penn State, those are not worries that I have at this point in time.
Yeah, well, to put a perfect bow on the segment, if you think about this is spring. This isn't the fall camp where they're still going to have that May, June, July offseason workout window to refine their bodies and things like that. And you'll get most of the guys back healthy. Like I know people have been asking about Denzel. He was out there today. Again, in a limited capacity, obviously you can see. Worth noting, I think he did get a new half sleeve. I think that was a new addition to the body. But with that being said, you're just looking, thinking, yeah, they don't have to be out there right now. But that's also a good sign of a healthy program that your stars don't need to be really full go or out there right now because you have so much depth built up. Whereas last spring it was like, well, hey, Denzel, if he misses a day, who you throwing to? Right. You and I are probably running routes at that point. And then that's no slight to the guys that were there, Giles and a few others. But you didn't have the overall bodies where you can now have Marcus Harris and Chris Lawson and Ray Reinsbright, and the freshmen go through their own thing. And then you have, Justice Williams, who's now, again, I know you're a big fan of him. So it's like, man, if he can stay healthy, somebody was asking me, so Omari's that guy. It's like, there's so many that guys that could emerge in this room. Just, again, the asterisk, can you stay healthy?
Yeah, we know who Damon Williams is going to turn to now, and it's Omari Evans. And we'll get there right after a message from our friends over at Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. Supply House, whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? So Supply House offers extra support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies at just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Lars, at the end of practice, Omari Evans exploded on that. There was the final series. They always play Sandstorm and go through a couple of team periods at the very end. And Omari Evans was out there mainly with the second team today, which was a rotation of quarterbacks. We saw Shea Kendall, we saw Kai Horton doing that. And 3 of the last 4 plays went to Omari Evans. It started with a real nice 9 route down the sideline where he made a catch between 2 defenders. Elias Johnson was the cornerback in coverage on the play, and I felt bad for him by the end there, man, because Omari just looked exactly – Jedd Fisch talked about it after. He looked like a senior receiver who has a really nice understanding of what he needs to do. So it started with that. And then on the next play, he just goes deep again, and Shea drops a touchdown in for him. So that was really nice to see. And then 2 plays later, fade ball like they always like to throw on that last play, kind of around the 5-yard line. And he just goes up and over him and just takes the ball away from Elias Johnson, who is a big, long cornerback. And I just was so encouraged because you and I talked about it after, the whole Jonte Cook thing. Omari comes in. We had our buddy Zach Seiko from Locked On Nittany Lions on here to talk about him as well. And it was, hey, in a Penn State offense, he wasn't ever necessarily utilized the way that he should be. We're 1 practice in, and it might be an overreaction, but I'm not concerned about the way that Jedd Fisch is going to utilize him.
Real quick, it was Kai Horton on the second touch.
Yes, it was. Yes.
Didn't want to interrupt you there because everything else was correct. But with that being said, it was right away when we talked about that's why you go and add a senior, because he knows, again, whether you say what you will about the Penn State offense, a James Franklin program will teach you fundamentals. So I'm not worried about him being foundationally, slow in that regard to catch up to a pro style system. It's just, hey, like the shackles are now free. You can actually show your full skill set. You can show everything. And I remember that they were going through some drills, and again, you don't want to glaze too much because you can't really read too much into a drill, especially when you're getting up the ball. But you could just I was standing behind him when I had the video, but you can just see the explosiveness is there. And then when you get to an 11-on-11 period, it's like, is he your go guy? Who cares? Whether he's your go guy or not, he's clearly one of your go-to guys at this point. And that's the good equation to have, because we still know how good Denzel is. Like, Omari is not going to take away from Denzel. You're not going to say, oh, wow, look at all the snaps and catches that Omari has, and it's kind of hurting Denzel. It's no. We saw what Jedd did at Arizona. You have 2 guys. The question is, who's your third? But I think that's a good problem to have because, we saw a couple of other, nice catches made, but really, it was Omari Evans' day when you come to the receivers from that side, from that perspective.
Oh, absolutely. And when you think about a third guy, obviously Decker DeGraff is going to be the first name that came to mind. Yeah. But we saw a lot of other guys stand out today where you set me up for it. As long as we're on receivers, I need to talk about Justice Williams, where it was very nice to see him healthy after we didn't really see much of him last year while he was dealing with an injury, and really getting to see him on the field for, I'm 95% sure this is the first time we've seen him. And he lived up to everything you thought he would be. For anybody who, out there like me, does enjoy watching the tape when these kids commit and when they sign and following progression from, sophomore to junior to senior year. You look at him where it's 6'3", 6'4", 205, 210 pounds, whatever it might be. NFL bloodlines, his dad played in the NFL. The more you watch him, the more you say, oh yeah, that makes sense. The way he moves, he's so fluid, and he's going to be with the third team for the most part. But he's somebody I really want to keep an eye on, as we talk about standouts from the first practice, where that's what it is, right? It's looking for some of these traits, these measurables where it's not full contact, and they're just, you have to look out for just different little things. It's what we talked about with Adam Muhammad, where you just watch him move, you watch how he's built, and you say, that kid's going to be somebody. And then you find out, oh, he's 6'2", 210 and 17 years old. Oh yeah, no, he's really going to end up being somebody. So Lars, in that mold, Adam Muhammad, you saw all that today. Who are some of the other guys that stood out to you?
So one thing that stood out to me was, the only real turnover of the day was Buda to forced a interception on, I want to say Shea. I think it was Shea. It certainly wasn't Damon. Damon had a fine day. Yeah, I think Jedd said he might have missed a couple. Again, like whatever. Cool.
I have some thoughts on Demond I'll get to in a minute. Yeah.
Like more power to you. But one thing that stood out to me was like when you're looking at that linebacker position, I didn't notice any missed tackles, but I noticed a pick and a turnover, and you just dropped perfectly into coverage. I don't know if it was to Decker or if it was to Kate. I forgot who it was to. I don't think it was to Decker, but it was to one of the tight ends. It was a drop back step over the middle. Just read it perfectly. And now again, does Demond make that read? Who knows? But you look and say, like, that linebacker position, we talked about it the other day, it's healthy as can be. Now, they're not all the same type of guys where like, X also flashed today, and obviously we don't get to see Jacob Manu. I did think I thought I saw Jacob for a half second, then I realized it was Dash Bailey. That's a different discussion for a different day. But you just look and I was like, oh, okay, well, Jacob's still out there. But either way, you're still having production at that position. So no matter what happens this fall, Washington's more than healthy at linebacker.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And I like where you're going with that. There are so many guys that really stood out to me. The one that one thing I have to say on Demond, because of course, right, we know what that's going to look like, where not only does he stand out physically because Jedd said that they were hoping to get him up to 200 pounds by today. Do you really notice that weight where he just looks bigger and more physical and more ready to take hits? It's the speed, man. It's the athleticism, where it's something we saw last year in the capacity that we, certainly needed to, given the circumstances that we talked about a little bit earlier. There were 2 plays during the team period where he makes the read on the read option, right? And from our vantage point, I'm not going to say it was the right read or it was the wrong read, but the edge rusher on that side stayed home, where normally that's a ball that, for any CFP 25 people out there, obviously very different. You hand that ball off. But with Demond, it doesn't matter. I'm not, comparing college football 25 real life by any stretch of the imagination, but that's just the best way to look at this. And with Demond, it never matters because he is able to just get to the sideline and get vertical and get around edge rushers. I think the first one that happened, it was on our side of the field, was Deshaun Lynch. And you just see him kind of just loop back around, and all of a sudden he takes off the sidelines and he's 12 yards downfield in the blink of an eye. Like it's so impressive watching him. And those are the little things that, shout out to Insider Coker, by the way. Got to chat with him on the sidelines a little bit during the practice. He pointed it out on Twitter yesterday, and I noticed it in the moment when Jedd Fisch was talking about Demond, when he was asked about him at his Monday press conference. You just see his face light up, and it's because of that ability. It's because of plays like that, where it really does sound like, we're just throwing all this oil on the Demond hype train, right? But at the same point, how many quarterbacks can you think of that legitimately can probably run a 4.3, which is what our buddy Jake Butt has talked about on the show, and make plays like that? Because there aren't many. That's the biggest thing with this, where watching his athleticism is what makes him so unique. He's got a great arm. He's a very talented quarterback with his arm alone. And then you add in all of that with his athleticism, and you say, yeah, I understand why Jedd believes he's going to be in New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony at some point during his time at UW.
Well, it goes back to what Demond is rooted in, and he's just such a grounded kid. He's I don't think kid is a derogative. I just say he's still young. Like, he has so much more to grow, and yet you look at him, and it's from day one. It's the UCLA game, it's the Penn State game, where both times where he made a significant scramble, it wasn't because it's like, oh, I'm not going to read the defense and panic, and I'm just going to use my legs. It's no, I have the ability to use my legs. I don't want to. I can if I need to, and so that's why he's real cerebral with his ability to run. And the way, as you were saying that, I'll make again, this is not obviously like for like comparison. I want to be clear about this, but instead of using a CFB 25 reference, we're going to use real life. We're going to say, it's what I kind of go back to, which is shorter version of Cam Newton, more built than Kyler Murray. I think he's smarter than Kyler in terms of as a runner. He knows when to read it versus Kyler. I think would naturally, scramble more just because he's more athletic in that respect compared to his arm. But I think Demond still wants to be able to be a passer first, which again gets more back to the Cam side of things. Hey, I still have the cannon. I can use my body. Now the thing is, the reason why I say Cam is A, because there's a Jedd Fisch tie-in, and B, because if you look at like Cam and you put him and Demond side by side, it's almost like if you just like scrunched Cam down to like a 5'10" body. Like, it really does look like if he's able to get up to like 220 or 210, at least 200, that's when you're going to start to see it. Where it's, hey, you can actually take those hits. You can lead with it. And unlike the Eastern Michigan game, instead of fumbling, you can get a first down or even get into the end zone. And so you just look at all those things, and it's like DeMond is building for something. And it's just that's why Jedd smiles so much. That's why we talk about him so much, is because we can see it. Like, all the traits are there. You just, again, you can't anoint him before it happens. But when it happens, neither of us are going to be surprised.
Well, it's one of those things where our buddy Christian Cable said it on the Y Option podcast with Yogi Roth, where he said, he was talking about Jonah Coleman, but he, parlays it into DeMond Williams. Where he said, if you didn't have DeMond Williams on this team, who is such an obvious star, I'm quoting Christian when I'm saying that. Like, that's one of the biggest reasons is everybody sees just all the potential, all the traits that are oozing off of him. And that's one of the reasons that it's so promising, right? Lars, one other guy I want to talk about where I'm just encouraged to see what this room is going to look like, and we talked about it a lot, is the safety position. We saw Rylan Dillard-Allen out there, and it's one of those things where on his first day as a true freshman, there's still growing to do, right? But you just look at the athleticism and you watch the way he moves, and you see that speed where he was laser timed at a 4.28, I believe it was, during his high school career. You see it. It shows up, and you say, okay, yeah, that's a guy where when he goes through this offseason program and he's able to get some more weight on him and get up to, let's just say 180, 185 at some point in time, right? Just right now before his freshman season. And he's able to still play with that athleticism. You see why this coaching staff prioritized him, and why even when he was committed to Arizona State, they did everything in their power to make sure that they could earn a commitment from that kid. And they did a really good job with that. But Lars, the other big standout was just how different this offensive line looked. And we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKDOWNCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKDOWNCollege for half off your first year.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
So Lars, the offensive line just looks different. It's not just the amount of bodies. It's not just the actual just physicality. And it's just, you look at that offensive line and I think I said it to you. We talked to some of the people today. I said, Jedd, when he had his signing day press conference about his offensive lineman, he said, hey, all the guys are here measured in at over 6'5" and 340 pounds. And I tweeted that out, and I saw a whole bunch of people say, yeah, he's lying. And then we saw them today. And I said, yeah, 340 might have been a stretch, or maybe that's what they were when they came in, and you trimmed them down a little bit. But he wasn't lying about them being much, much bigger.
I mean, like, if you say 6'4", 320 versus 6'4", 340, like, okay, like, that's not – okay, that's fine. Like, it's the difference, if it's, 6'4", 320 and 6'4", 275. Like, that's one thing. But you looked at all of them today, I'm like, oh, okay, wow, John Mills is even more impressive. And that's just a freshman. Champ to LA, same thing. And you look, Carver Willis.
Jack
okay,
Schaefer
wow.
too, man.
Jack Schaefer. I think did I mention the juggling story about him?
No.
So he's the big juggler. Like, he can actually juggle. It's crazy. That's
awesome.
But the reason why I say that is it's like this is a talented group that is very – and we saw the athleticism, I think, today, where when they're going through some of those drills, you can see how quickly some of those guys move. I do want to highlight quickly Max McCree. Like, I remember talking to you off the air when Max told me, like, I love offensive line because you can just beat somebody up on every single play. And, like, we saw that violence to a degree last season, but we didn't truly see it. We're like, I saw it today where he kept – again, it wasn't, like, overly, over the top or anything like a bad team or anything. But you could see, like, there's a different focus in his eye where he's like, hang on, no, this is my chance to, win this left tackle job, and they can kick, Carver over to right where he's been the past couple of years. Like, I'm down for this. that's a massive addition where we talk about Damon in the offense. Like, if you can have bookend tackles that you don't have to worry about that are veterans, much different than last season.
Oh, absolutely. So let's circle back around to the backups in a second, because I wanted to check my notebook and just say, hey, let's go through the starting offensive line. It's not necessarily a huge surprise to anybody who's stuck with us throughout the offseason. Yeah, starters, right? Air quotes. Where right now it's left tackle Carver Willis, left guard is Pocky Finau, center is Landon Hatchett, right guard was Zach Henning, and right tackle was Drew Party. As of right now on day one, that's what the starting offensive line looked like. And I wanted to bring that up after you talk about Max McCree, because let's see what that looks like, right? Where, we talked to Carver and he's told us, yeah, if they want me to play left tackle, I'll play left. If they want me to play right, I'll play right. That's fine. Whatever it is, I'm interested in doing that. And it was really encouraging to see Pocky Finau with the first team. I think that was the other thing that I wanted to make sure we touched on when it comes to the starters, because outside of that, I can't say there were any surprises really where we knew who was going to start at center. It was going to be one of two people, or two of three people at the two guard spots. We knew that the other one in that mix was Garrett Hatchett. And then the tackles was, okay, yeah, we wouldn't be surprised if it's Drew because he started all 13 games at right last year. And then, Carver on the left, whatever that might have looked like. But I'm really interested to see what this is going to look like, with Pocky Finau, because we've said it a million times on the show. Everybody around the program is so excited around what that might be. But then B, it is, what is Max McCree going to do to push himself back into this conversation at tackle? Because you look at all the bodies there, Elijah Chiquette still has a little bit of room to put on weight. I feel like you could say the same about Solani Fasolo, but you look at just what those other three guys bring to the table. And, that's adding in Justin Hilkema. That's adding in David Boyachian, who might play a little bit of guard as well. But I just look at, especially Hilkema, I kind of want to throw him into this bucket just so we talk about more depth. And I just say, I feel so much better about where this offensive line is right now.
Yeah, and when I remember you mentioned Justin Hilkema to be last spring, like, hey, that's the guy who should be in the 2 deep. It's like, I don't know about as a freshman. Like, I'm with you on the side. Like, it wasn't for a lack of ability. It was more or less like, I think just by proxy, they're going to have most of those guys redshirt and just get built into the program so that this spring you have a running head start and you can say, now you know what it looked like last year in the Big Ten. Even though you didn't play, you practiced, you understood, you were a part of it. You got to grow into your body, because when I saw him today, yeah, like I remember I was like number 70. He was, oh wow. Like, and it's like, yes, like now it's like even more of a presence than it was before. Not that he like grew it, because again, he was already a sequoia tree. So you just look at it and think, okay, like, can you take the next step? Can you be a little more athletic? And not to say he's not, but just, can you take that next step in your game? And I think it's also kind of reinforces why they didn't go and get a veteran guard aside from Guerin, where it's, you know what, we're going to lean on these young guys and we believe in them enough. Pocky and Zach showed us enough last season to say, you know what, go for it. Like, Landon's already spoken for, so that's obvious. But you just look at some of those other ones where it's like, Zach, I think really is going to find his way into the 2 deeps. Like, I don't know what position, but I feel like at this point, it would be real hard pressed to see Zach not in the 2 deeps, because obviously Pocky, I think at this point, being as a starting left guard, I think short of him regressing, which either of us don't see happening, I wouldn't be surprised if he's your starting left guard.
So I'm with you there. The one name that I wanted to bring up that we also saw at left guard is somebody you mentioned earlier. And I'm just curious to see what this development track is going to look like for him and others, because Jack Schaefer's another one I want to throw into this boat, but it was John Mills, because we saw him with second or third team at left guard. I can't remember which it was. I'm pretty sure it was the third, but it's one of those things where I love this development track for some of these guys. And it's exactly what you said. It's why you didn't go out and get other guys and other veterans in the portal. We'll see if you do that in the spring, right? If, we're sitting here having this conversation on, I don't know, like April 29th, and it's, oh, hey, they added this veteran guard who decided to throw his name into the transfer portal. It's okay. We'll see. Okay. Yeah. Maybe they were uncomfortable with, some of the inexperience at that position, but we know that's not a calling card of Jedd Fisch. We know it's, hey, we like these young guys. We brought them in and we told them we were going to play them early and we were going to follow through with some of those promises. And we just like these development tracks. We've seen it before with Jonas Avanaya, with Wendell Moy, with a lot of those guys that played down at Arizona and built into a 10-win roster. And that's what Jedd's whole thing is. It's, hey, if you're in the rotation as a freshman, obviously you're probably going to make a couple mistakes, but then by your sophomore and junior year, you're not seeing the field for, say, your fourth or fifth game, right? You have 15, 16, 17 games under your belt already. And especially along the offensive line, when you have 7, 8, 9 guys you can feel confident in, I personally, if they're freshmen or seniors, what does it matter if you are confident in them? Because we had this conversation on this show in 2023 about Landon Hatchett. It was you and I sat here and said, oh, we're shocked that Ryan Grubb said, hey, yeah, that's the guy who's going to be in the rotation. But okay, if you trust him, fine, that's on you. And if it works, hey, more power to you.
And similar to that conversation with Landon, where when you saw him in practice, it was, oh, okay, now it makes sense. Like where you look at, and it's not just about like, you know, the first guy that walks up the bus is always the most intimidating, but he also could be, you know, bull rush 20 times. Like there's one thing to look big, but then they also seem to play big. And I think that's the other thing where you're looking and now saying, all these guys landed, you have a year in the Big Ten. You know what it's like to start. You know how to be a leader. Now you can take that next step because you have all those bank reps. And kind of goes back to what we were saying, Zach Henning 2 years ago when Kalen mentioned, like, hey, he's getting some reps at center. And then last spring, it's like, hey, we're going to throw Zach Henning in there. It's like, what are these reps for exactly? And then now you see it this spring. It's like, oh, hey, wow, okay, that's actually a guy who could be your, you know, backup center if you want and have Guerin at a guard spot or whatever the case may be, because eventually – not all these guys are going to be able to start all 13 games, whatever you want to say. But if you can get these guys in 12 or 13 games and, you know, 5 are at left, 5 are at right, a couple are at tackle, that's a good problem to have because you're at least the players can say, hey, yeah, I might not be a starter, but I'm getting in and getting developed and getting significant reps. So hopefully next season I can start, and we'll sort next season out when we get there.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank to all of you tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout spring ball. So please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. So that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please, if it's 5-star reviews, it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Thursday.